happening. And oh boy, was my inbox full of people saying, what happened to the playbacks? And so to all those people, I say hello. And here we go into the tech news. Where's the air horn? There it is. Here we go. So the November 30th, the top story is CNN. It says Chinese state media, a 5-day COVID-19 lockdown in Zhengzhou, home to Foxconn iPhone plant, has been lifted. And analysts say disruptions cost Apple about $1 billion a week. And then Reuters says they've done analysis of Apple's supply chain data shows that 44 to 47% of Apple's suppliers were China-based between 2014 and 2019. I smell a Tech News Jeopardy coming up. What percent of Apple's suppliers are Chinese-based in 2021? Again, the question is, Apple's suppliers were 47% Chinese-based in as far as recently as 2019. What were they 2 years later in 2021? So it went from 47 to what?
27
to 18.
11.
85.
65 to 70.
65.
Correct answer is 36. So it went from 47% to 36% in 2 years. And recent headlines on this issue tell me that the real change is going to be in 2022. That most of the changes around Apple's suppliers and pushing their suppliers to de-Chinify themselves has happened in the past 12 months. So I would love to see the latest info on that, because that stat is from 2021. I would imagine that it would probably at least continue that trend. Is might be accelerating a bit, so we might be down to 26%, maybe even 20-ish, low 20s. Seems very plausible to me. And so the question is, why is Apple going from half of its suppliers being Chinese in 2019 to a quarter, let's say a quarter, just for easy conversation, from half to a quarter in 2022, and its own manufacturing with Foxconn not slowly shifting from mainland to notably Vietnam and India. And this is a what are those questions? It's a facetious question. It's a disingenuous question. The answer is because the U.S. is telling Apple to get out of there, and Apple knows that it needs to get out of there geopolitically, and they don't want to be caught in a situation where, like what's happening, like Huawei or this protesting. Yeah, although Apple wants to do business there, they're walking that tightrope. But anyway, we started discussing this topic before the headlines even started about this stuff more than a year ago. So this is just a very big ongoing story that will continue. It's the big decoupling of the U.S. and China, and U.S. is telling everybody, stop doing business in China. And oh, by the way, no, you can't sell any kind of chips or any serious technology. You can't go to China anymore, just like you can't sell anything to Cuba or North Korea or whatever. We're going to brick them. We're going to build a wall around them and keep them in 2022 as we continue to do quantum computing and everything else, and we're going to leave them behind so they can't have the next generation of tools. Because God knows, China knows how to use technology to maintain its power. They give the CCP credit where it's due. They know how to use technology to their advantage. And in ways that, by the way, did Christian jump out? How unfortunate, because that was the perfect segue to introduce Christian, who was on stage. He was here until a minute ago. So he's from Sweden, and he was one of the biggest stories in Sweden this year, where Sweden's trying to make the school system more digital friendly and everything else, and making an app for parents and everything else. And boy, is that was a crazy episode, as every Swede well knows. But um, yeah, that's why we can't afford China having the lead on AIs and quantum and everything else, because of what they could potentially do with it, what they do when they get their hands on things like that. So the next story is, in an interview, SBF claims he donated about the same amount of money to both parties this year, 2022, but the GOP donations were quote unquote dark money because he says the press would have gone apeshit. So there was all this talk about how SBF had donated so much to the Democrats. And he's now saying, I gave equal money to the Republicans. But I had to do so very cleverly to keep the journalists, mainstream media. If he had been donating to Republicans, mainstream media would have gone ballistic on him. And now let's see the how favorable the press is on on FTX now that this little ditty has been revealed.
Well, Tyler, just as a marker for everyone else, Trump for decades, I think, gave for both politicians. In fact, when he was in that debate, when he called Hillary out and said the system's rigged, how does he know it's rigged? Because he uses it.
Yeah.
That's how you use the system. If you have enough money, if it's made up to begin with and you're running a Ponzi scheme, why not give to both? I think just like a lot of corporations probably do, it's to get the politicians in their pocket. And that's the fraud that having too much money in politics really brings, that I think should just be highlighted here out of that story.
So
Did you just listen to David Chappelle's speech?
no.
He said the same thing. It's hilarious.
Well, they're very
And he
common
was
things.
he was actually
I think
quoting
Stephen
the
Kotkin
yeah.
or who was on somebody in the Hoover Institution was saying it too. Just about if you want to look at the real source of um, failure from 2015, 2016, and forward, it's that each party only calls out the hypocrisy of the other. They don't call out their internal hypocrisy. And when you're in a filter bubble, you end up with people that are so divided and polarized that they only want to concede ground that fits their particular spoon-fed stuff.
So apparently he said a whole bunch of interesting things in an interview where he said, when asked why did he prioritize withdrawals, like there was a run on FTX, people were trying to get their money out, and not all the money was there. So the people who were at the front of the line got their money out, and he prioritized people withdrawing who were located in the Bahamas. And the question is, why would he do that?
Ladies and
Oh
gentlemen,
no, sorry, wrong. Why did he allow the people in the Bahamas to withdraw first?
Because that's where his hideout is.
Because that's
Those
where
were his
he doesn't want to be
roommates.
murdered. Yeah, he doesn't want to be murdered is the actual answer to that one. Because he lives.
Exactly.
And credit to Sam for admitting that. He says you don't want to be in a country full of angry people.
Well, if you've been to those islands, there's plenty of them where people could disappear.
Yeah, true that. If you're a bad actor on an island, small islands of small populations is not where you want to be hanging out. If you're a legit bad actor, because they will do what's called island justice and take care of
So
you.
Tyler, I also reckon that I mean he's regulated out of the Bahamas. So if he, the other like sort of I guess sane answer is that you're going to prioritize where you're regulated. Then you could say that well, people outside of Bahamas, you're not in the front of the line because I'll get shut down in Bahamas if I don't prioritize them, and then there will be any money left for anyone outside of that. I mean, that would be like a more sane answer. That's not so much. But yeah, I agree that absolutely the islanders will come after you with pitchforks.
Right.
Oh, it's easy to become fish food,
Although,
I
however,
guess.
it was revealed that he owes a very considerable amount of money. in the ballpark of $100,000 ish to the Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville Resort in Nassau for meals and all kinds of incidental charges. I guess they had a very long running tab there. What else? He's going to be speaking tomorrow at the the New York Times event. So
Yeah, originally.
we still is
Let's get
slated,
on the screen. Yeah, is using the remote interview.
slated to be, and he says he's going to. Although we have to assume he means remotely, because there will be people waiting at LaGuardia who didn't get their money out. If you know what I'm saying. Uh, Interviews detail FTX and SBF's lavish spending, aided by minimal internal controls, including $300 million on Bahamian real estate and chartering Amazon deliveries. Last year, employees discovered that Amazon did not deliver to the island. Oh, so he paid for Amazon to deliver to a place that they don't normally deliver to. When crypto exchange FTX moved its headquarters to the Bahamas from Hong Kong last year, employees discovered that Amazon did not deliver to the island, so he took care of that. Sources detail Alameda's early years. Anyway, the European Central Bank says that Bitcoin is quote unquote rarely used for legal transactions and is quote on the road to irrelevance without citing any strong data points. Okay, and then who gave a good tweet about that? That's not good news for the future of Bitcoin regulations in the EU, by the way. In terms of if you're interested in government approved Bitcoin, uh, if you're fantasizing about a truly decentralized, illegal by the state Bitcoin, sure, that can always happen. The Pirate Bay's still running. PirateBay.org. You can download stuff right now. And the states did their best and put those founders in jail. And they can't, similar to that, the U.S. has been doing its damnedest to get that shut down, and yet it's still running. So, yeah, Bitcoin will be around, even if it's illegal, although you'll have to have it truly decentralized. You'll have to have cold wallet. It's going to be very limited in scope and scale, depending on where you live and how that country feels about it. Although you could have a whole network of countries that support it too, like South America or Africa or wherever, and it could become truly massive there. So it's a state by state scenario. But the EU is kind of significant as far as a block of states goes. So internal messages at Twitter. Twitter's EMEA, that's Middle East and Africa, Europe, Middle East, Africa, ad revenue dropped 15% year over year. And I'm surprised it's not more, honestly. And by the way, so is every ad network's ad revenue dropping 15% year over year. So this is hardly new. It's not news specific to Twitter at all. So anyway, weekly bookings are down 49%. Source Blue, and the sources say that Twitter Blue is delayed as Twitter seeks to skirt App Store fees. Okay, that's an interesting rumor that Twitter might be trying to figure out how to get around the App Store fees for the $8 a month that they'll be collecting by getting you to sign up through the web. And Netflix had a strategy for doing this, and different apps have had different strategies for trying to get you to pay directly to skirt the App Store fees.
Didn't Elon talk about creating his own phone to avoid app stores or float the idea?
He was responding to somebody that said, "What would you do if Apple banned your app from the App Stores?" He'd say, "Well, I'd have to make my own phone." But they were already live in the Apple App Store and collecting fees, and they would have continued to go if everything was smooth sailing, hunky dory. But it wasn't. There was there was people pretending to be the Pope and everything else with their new blue check mark, so they had to shut that down and fix that problem, which they're doing. I don't get the sense that there was much of an interest in avoiding the App Store. They already had it going. They would have kept it going. They already knew the App Store was going to take that. If they wanted to avoid the App Store, they would have avoided it the first time around, not on the second pass. So I, I question or doubt the rumor on that one. Republicans Ron DeSantis, Ken Buck, Mike Lee, Marsha Blackburn, and others mentioned legislative action to curb Apple's app market power after Elon Musk's tweets. And that tells you is an interesting demonstration of the power of the tweets of this Elon Musky guy. That you now have Republicans of note now digging deep into this issue. Now you got the Republicans all fired up to crack down on Apple's monopoly, and Apple's very sensitive to this issue. This is Apple's worst nightmare coming true right now, and based on Elon's tweets. That's some hot shit because they already lost this in Korea. Where else was it challenged? Was it in the Netherlands, May, where this was that courts decided in favor of the app developers to be able to circumvent the Apple App Store? I believe it was at least Korea and at least one other place. I thought it was the Netherlands. I could be wrong. But,
No, you're correct.
okay. This issue in the U.S., boy, Apple knows very well this 30% App Store game that they've had going on for quite a while. They make obscene amounts of billions every year doing this, and this is precisely how it could end very, very quickly. As the U.S. says, "Oh, app developers can choose their own payment gateways," and then this is a very, very, very concerning development for Apple that now Republicans are making plans to curb
Tyler.
Apple's Apple market power after Elon Musk tweets. I have to imagine Apple's like, God damn that fucking Musk dude. They now have to be incredibly careful how they do things going forward here with regard to Twitter here. If they ban Twitter, oh boy, if they ban Twitter, this is what's interesting. Let's just read the 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 implication, the bigger implications here. If Apple was even debating about banning Twitter, I wonder what their thoughts are now with Republican lawmakers, getting their pitchforks all shinied up. And if Apple does ban Twitter, they can almost guarantee that the Republicans in the U.S. will come for their throat on this issue. Are they willing to risk that to ban one app? Ame?
I was just curious to see how that would look like in software development or those apps, the decentralization of those apps. Because if you do give it to other payment providers like Mali in Netherlands or Adyen in Netherlands, it'd be interesting to see how they could actually break apart that bit of a monopoly that Apple's had on just the Apple Store. So I'd be curious to see the pitchforks being sharpened in Europe in the EU, because it's also about sovereignty over being able to kind of make app development more fair and equitable. And it seems like Apple has a monopoly or possibly a cartel on that market, and those margins are really high, and they just keep on pushing into all these countries. So I'm just curious how that would affect, how it would, if that would in fact change how app developers function when they build those applications for the iPhone, for the iOS store or the Android store. I'm just curious. And you're in tech, so I'm just kind of ideating from a tech perspective, from the software development perspective, like how would that influence software developers? What direction would it make them want to go? Would they lean towards more decentralization so they have the freedom of what payment processor they could use?
The main value of these app stores is discovery. The security and kind of making sure your consumers have a secure app is another very important factor. There's no let me just say it's all about the publishing value and discovery. I'll just offer that. I'll just
Got
leave it
it.
at that.
No, I see
Yeah,
that. That's why I'm ideating out loud, because from if you decentralize the application development process, you actually make it more free to do what you do in development. But yes, the distribution per se is the visibility that the app store makes it easy peasy for people to just go and double click on the right side of their iPhone and purchase or download an app. You know, it makes it really easy. It's like a one-stop shop. If you like, what would happen if that goes away? What would be the user experience and the visibility and the distribution of those future potential applications to make people's life a little bit less drama filled? So yeah, this is an interesting one for sure.
I would
Amy, it's
argue.
Ben. Oh,
Oh, go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
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 sorry, go
please
ahead.
go ahead. No, please go.
I
It
was
was
just,
you.
I was just going to say that I think that the one of the big value adds is just that it's the ease. If you look at a Mac, on a Mac, you have both the Mac App Store, which is identical to the iPhone store in behavior. In fact, you can even download iPhone apps onto a modern Apple Silicon Mac, as you know. Or you can go and get software the normal way, which is you go to the person's website, you download it, and you install it. And it's actually in this day and age, with phones as powerful as they are basically just, in fact, they almost use exactly the same chip, right? So a phone is just a smaller version of an iPad, which is a smaller version of a laptop. There's absolutely no reason, apart from, Apple don't allow it, but there's absolutely no reason it would be a fundamentally impossible. It would be a much worse experience than the App Store on a phone, but it wouldn't be that different to what it is on a desktop, and we're all used to that. I think we just got very used to it being like this on a phone, and it would only be a few clicks to go to the manufacturer's website or the developer's website and download onto a phone.
Ben, this goes back to what Carl was saying about security, how we've gotten really lazy about connecting everything to Google and Apple and them storing our data somewhere somewhere as we make it, as we're getting it easier, we're compromising, we're losing something, right? And what you're describing is very simply either you do it through the iPhone, through the actual device, or you go to the website and you do it from the actual site of the software or the application, right?
Yep.
Challenges is it's a consumer behavior thing that people are trading off their data, people are trading off their sovereignty for convenience, and I think that's a bigger pink elephant in the room.
Yeah, in the
If
early
you
days, there was no file app on the iPhone or on the iOS, so you couldn't even see your files. Remember that? Now there's obviously the file app, but you couldn't even see it. So it wasn't even kind of conceivable to just download and then find your downloads folder and then click the app. But it's totally conceivable, and I don't think people would have a big problem moving now. So just a thought. I'm slightly confused looking at it as to why we are so stuck in this App Store model when we don't fundamentally have to be.
or even go back a few years, right before there was the App Store, because that was a big innovation of Apple. There was they called it the Deck. But anybody remember the feature phones? Anybody in here old enough to remember the feature
Oh
phones?
my God.
There was like 10 games, or there was basically 10 slots, and that was basically the whole business. That was the struggle for the whole game industry as mobile was starting. Remember that Snakes game and just different games. So the App Store was a huge innovation, but it just hasn't solved the problem yet. And the 30% quote unquote fee is just it hasn't solved the discovery problem yet. So I would offer that when somebody, whether it's Epic or whoever, some startup really can solve an app store problem, that's where the developers want to go. Quite frankly, I made this whole decentralization value and kind of that's not the problem. The problem is how do you make money as a developer? That's it, that they're in business to go go get some customer acquisition. I'll close with simply saying that as the App Store took off. One of the key enablers for monetization for apps was the in-app advertisement for lead acquisition. I forget some of the company names. There were some early exits for to enable game game developers to have the little, to advertise other apps, right? So that's how you would do discovery, and that's how you do discovery. It's not did. It's still a really big deal. So, anyways, thanks for letting me share a few.
Yeah, I just think just a one quick little thing which I find really fascinating. Like the reality is most of these software developers are creating applications in theory that help us live a life that's a little bit more easy, a little bit more less, just to make things more efficient, right? But there are some app developers out there that are just literally competing to see if someone could make one tweak, one small coding change that distinguishes them from the next app developer. I feel there's quite a bit of ego in the space as well, that I don't think we need like 50 billion apps or something. I mean, if you look at through the app store, you're probably going to, outside of gaming, you probably have productivity apps, a lot of different other apps, but it seems like there's no real big innovation. It's just like 10 or 20 apps that do more or less the same thing, and they're just competing for which app developer is going to be the one to have the most visibility. And to me, it just seems like it's overkill. But I could completely be off track. But I just feel like, do we need all these app developers to be making all these applications that are kind of really just filling up an app store and just making you want to FOMO to download apps?
I mean, yes.
So,
So the argument about discoverability, I don't buy for a start. There's what 3 or 4 million apps on the App Store. That's not somewhere that being there, being one of 3 or 4 million, just like as Tyler was discussing yesterday with Spotify and the Pareto principle around that. Maybe there's 20 times more songs on Spotify than there are apps in the App Store, but there's still a lot of apps. So I'm not convinced I want to be one of 4 million apps on the App Store. And your point, Emmy, about it's a hustle for your marketing position is spot on. I downloaded some diet tracking app thing the other day. It was absolute shit. You take photos of your food and it puts it in a grid, and it does nothing more than that for you, nothing more than your Photos app does for you. And yet they wanted like £80 a year, and you have a 1 week free trial, and then they charge you for a year. And who the hell remembers to put in their diary a week ahead? Well, I do because I'm a geek, but who remembers to put in their diary a week ahead that you should cancel this thing, when you've realized that
I
it's
do.
crap? And
I'm
yeah,
right
me
there with
too.
you.
Me too. I'm sure most people here do, but a lot of people don't. And I think they're making their money because somebody goes, oh, I really, I want this thing. I want to keep track of it. And it does absolutely nothing. It has no value. Absolute crap. And somehow that makes it to the top because it can afford the money on the marketing and so forth. So it's not a meritocracy, and it's not great for discoverability of the best things.
Yeah, and I just want to call the question about whether a creative startup could solve the 30% tax going through an existing app store, when in fact it may be purely a regulatory issue because the platform itself is a natural monopoly. And so, how do you overcome a natural monopoly? And it's very difficult to do that without some regulatory framework.
So on the
And interesting to know, just quickly, the stats are something like, hey, if you're paying a 30% tax to Apple, you're also paying a tax to the government, and then you're a minority stakeholder in your own creative works, which is kind of silly. So I think that was actually one of Tim Sweeney's main arguments, or one of the arguments that he made early on that seemed to be like, hey, you're saying this makes sense, but here's how we don't feel that it makes sense. And I think that's also something important, especially when thinking of startups, that the margins are so tight and revenues can be difficult. So.
Just to
Eric, I'm
clarify, because
glad
we
you.
keep on making
Oh,
the same thing about the tax, it's 15%. It's 30% for apps that make over $1 million, which is less than, I think it's less than 5% of the apps on the Apple App Store. On the Google App Store, I think it's 3, because like 97% of the apps on the Google App Store are free. So I just want to clarify it. So when you talk about payment processors, for example, because we've investigated this at one of our companies, and if you're only paying 15% and you try to move payment processing to somebody else and they're charging you 5%, there's just really no incentive to move off of Apple when they're doing such a great job.
we'll
I
never
think we can
know.
learn a lot from. Sorry, I think we can learn. I think we can learn a lot from what Tim Sweeney did on the PC. So PCs ended up with Steam. It ended up being the de facto place to get your video games from, pretty much, and there's almost no choice. I mean, you can sideload things on an iPhone with Test Flight and stuff like that, but it's as much almost would be almost as crazy as downloading a game on a PC anywhere but Steam. And Tim Sweeney came along and created the Epic Game Store, but why should you open it? So you've got the Epic Game Store, you put games on it, you invest a lot of money buying exclusives or whatever. But why should I open the Epic Game Store each day? My library is fragmented. I've got to look at two places. And what they did was very clever. They gave you a free game every few days or something. So you have to open the store to see if there's a free game. They're waiting for you. It costs them a fortune, but it's put it into our consciousness in a way that gamers open the Epic Game Store, several times a week to see what the next free game. And they're serious free games. They spend millions on these, tens of millions on these free games. So maybe a model there.
So
Yeah,
that
that was a
was. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no. I was just going to say, yeah, that was a great point. That I think to prove to people that hey, we're going to pay our way into your consciousness, into your mind space. You have to pay for it one way or another. And giving away free content, I'm not sure what the particular details were. That okay, if you claim the game, does the publisher get paid when you claim the game or when you actually install and play it? So I think there was some nuance there in the license, but just a side detail there. Thanks.
Well, it's a brilliant merchandising tactic that you're speaking to, but we'll never know. But about 12 or 13 years ago, I was at a startup and we built a kind of a totally different type of experience. And what I'm saying is, there back then it was kind of the first chapter of all these were the portals, the game portals, where you would just go and you'd find a game. You just would search for a game and there was just no really rich experience there. The startup that I was with, we converged like a whole social network where the gamers and the devs and studios were all kind of just all intertwined, and I still haven't seen anything quite like that, but that's still, in my opinion, still what's missing. There's some special sauce about how much of a veneer of social interaction you have. Now with Xbox and stuff, you have these massive games that have, you find your friends, you have that coupled in there, but there's still a little bit of a hurdle. So I think that the App Store category is going to see some more innovation catalyzed by what Epic is, doing and holding Apple accountable. Because that what was once a 30-point tax, it was, I think, with the game portal chapter of all of this, category, it was like in 40%. I remember I had a buddy of mine who would help a bunch of my dev friends go get contracts with portals and stuff like that to get distribution. But in any case, I'm really kind of, for me, in my experience, I think it's all about the discovery because it's a customer acquisition problem that all these millions of entrepreneurs. I think that there's a gazillion ripoffs and copycats, but the App Store singularly, I think, really, really dramatically catalyzed entrepreneurship for software devs and really got us to a whole new place in entrepreneurship more generally, even outside of just the software dev community who before mobile app stores were, stuck making apps for Windows and stuff like that. So in any case,
I'll dovetail off of that from a perspective of having uploaded the first APK of Shazam into the Apple App Store before the App Store went live. And prior to that, the world of mobile development, as many of you know, was per J2ME.
We're losing you.
When I look back at this, I think that moment for Apple to unlock not just discovery. So point taken that today it's all about the discovery value for an entrepreneur to launch something. But really what it was a moment in time where one person in their one room bedroom in New York could distribute something that she or he created effectively globally. And I think that point gets completely missed or forgotten. So I struggle on this whole topic, but I see where Apple built something extraordinary. And yes, they put a tax in there. So no one has to go upload their app into Apple App Store. And if they choose to do that, are they not reaping the benefit of the global reach, the ease of efficiency, the credibility of the security, and a payment mechanism that's very fluid? It's interesting today, we've got many different financial, a Shopify didn't exist 15 years ago. Web3 didn't exist. So I think there's just two different timelines for us to reflect on But yeah, that global reach instantaneously at a click was a phenomenal earth changing moment.
It definitely provides a lot of value, whether it's for the amount that they're charging now. But I mean, let's talk about metaverse, right? What, 47.5% that they're going to charge developers? I think everybody does it when they start up, right? They're creating something that they can jump on and make money on.
And to be clear, I should put a pin on my point that it cost a ton of money to mobile develop back then. And I used to go around the world to get Shazam pre-installed on down in Brazil, on China Mobile, on AT&T, on Verizon. All of that cost, I think, was lower than the tax that Apple charges.
The question I have is we're locked in on this, not just us, but people are locked in on the 30%. Would there have been a similar discussion if Apple had had a lower tax, or is it just the concept of the size of the tax that's driving this discussion?
So again, I've got to tie that back to what was around before then, and the game portals were charging 40%, so 30% was less than 40. So the thing is with the rise of Apple, no one's pushed back on 30, and now at this point, fast forward how many freaking years, finally there's a pushback. It's long coming, and it should occur, but the context was it was less than than some of the other game portals.
And so, and it goes back to when I lose point of reference, then I forget. Because even if it was 20%, people would probably be bitching about it still, even though they forgot that it was theoretically half of the other. Is Apple
Yeah,
missing
great point.
out by not keeping people up on context of what things were? I'm just trying to figure out if I was an Apple, what would my strategy be to combat your bitching about my pricing? And that is, do I give you context of what it would be, or do I start lowering it to show you that,
So, so Robert,
I'm just
you're talking about transparency of cost and production, and like what the young lady was saying about sort of development time and the cost of development, past and future. But I think it's just like the gravy train is coming to an end. Do you know what I'm saying? I think when back about 20 years ago, maybe it was easier to get away with it, to be quite frank. But I think now, as things are becoming more open source and things are becoming more about transparency and understanding like the bottom line and the cost, and people are being real frugal of where their money is going, I think that Apple could be more open and transparent about some of the costing. But in that open and transparency, this is why the EU is probably going after them as well, because the EU is very good on their numbers at the European Union, and they're like, wait a second, this doesn't match up. Like, why is this so high, and where are you providing the value for that? And it's all locked up, and no one else could access it. So at some point, we're not with that. We want it to be more fair. So I think that people are just waking up, and they're sort of now saying, okay, I don't want this, I want this. And consumers have a lot of power when they start rallying.
I
I'd
guess where
like
I'm
to
going
bring a
with this,
slightly
I just
different
want people to
perspective.
consider if
Oh,
if Apple was to give any of you on stage a hefty contract to say, how do I solve this image? How do I go about my pricing on this particular topic? How do I deal with the federal government? If I was Apple to give you a multi-million dollar contract, how would you do that?
so Robert, well, as somebody would
I got an answer.
so hold on, just 2 seconds. Got a thought here. So I have no issue at all getting 70% of something I wouldn't have otherwise got from an app store that's given me wonderful exposure and scale and all sorts. The question is, how do I know what to
85.
compare it? Well, whatever percent, 10%, call it 1%. How do I know what to compare it to? I can't test whether that is reasonable because I can't get it to those way. And also, I don't get to choose the price points I offer it to those users at. The quantization of the price points has got to make a fairly significant difference to the friction and the willingness for people to buy. I just can't test it. So I got a choice of either putting it on Apple at one of their price points or not at all. And I can't stand back from it and say, you know what, I'm very happy to pay this marketplace fee. We had exactly this with Udemy and our courses. For a long time, that were the only places we sold our courses. They sold millions and millions of dollars our courses. We were very grateful for them. Whatever they took because there was no other option. Now we've built our own channel that rivals and actually beats them. from scratch at last, just a milestone last month. It feels very back and say, well, do I choose to go to Udemy at their price points, which they choose, and the way on Apple at the moment, you can't do that. You cannot create that other stream for comparison. So I guess that would be my concern.
What are you
Can I clarify
microwaving?
one point? I mean, you can create your own price point, so I'm not clear what you meant by that. You
Well, I
decide
don't
your own
think you can.
price.
You don't. Do you do you
Yes.
decide? Oh, only from a
Yep.
series of predefined price points, because it certainly used to be one of a series of predefined price points
No, you
on
you
Apple,
select your price.
or down to the
I mean, obviously,
cent.
it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous the fact that the first starting is 99 cents, right? So I
That's
get
what
I get
that's what I mean.
yeah,
Yeah,
I get your
yeah, yeah.
point. And well, I think the worst thing is that it's become so. I mean, it's ridiculous that you spend so much time on an application, and now everybody's expecting an application for 99 cents.
Phil, that was
When
that
people,
was the first few years, right? It was so what let me just offer that that's where we got the innovation of try before you buy. They got the little trial where there's different pricing schemes that have helped. I agree that it's still a little brittle, but there are different approaches to kind of get trial, give it away for free, and then managing your experience in a way that you on ramp them to a value that they will buy into, right?
Yeah, I
So
don't
that's
remember calling this stuff shareware, so I'm just like, yo, it's just marketing. We just changed what we're calling it. But I really do think back to something like what Larry Ellison said. He said, we actually used to physically ship CDs to people. So there are innovations that have come along that have made it cheaper. So what is the cost now? What is the true operating cost of such a service? Maybe once it was a little more expensive, and is it reasonable to further push the prices down? Yeah, let's be more efficient. I thought that was a big thing in computers, right? So you also end up standing at the grain of the culture of geeks and computers if you're not willing to kind of give a little, take a little here and there. So I think the conversation is definitely worth having, and I'm happy to see that, as Phil said, that it has actually reduced. Tim Sweeney went to war. People say they didn't win. Well, policies changed. I would say that's a victory of sorts.
yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have the conversation, but let me just share something for people who are not developers on here. We have played royalty charges on software forever. I don't know if any of you guys remember, but even we used to develop enterprise software back in the DOS days. And if you bought a charting library, if you bought a networking library, you paid royalty. So that means that if your library was used in an application that you sold to somebody, you had to pay the developer of that library 5%. This has always been the case. This is nothing new. It's just that Apple is getting a lot of visibility because everybody knows about again, we keep talking about 30%, but it's no longer 30, it's 15%. For the other 6%, it's 30, right? And that's what EA is all upset about. But anyways, going back well, the EU certainly targets Apple, but they have to target everybody. Then they got to target Google. They've got to target Unity, Unreal Engine, Facebook. I mean, everybody. That's how they make money. That's how they pay for these app stores and the services they provide. Note that Apple gives their development tools away, all their beta software away. It's part of your developer, what you get for.
Great point, Phil. Thanks for sharing that. But for everyone, again, if I was on here and about to issue you a contract to help me solve this, I mean, we just keep talking about the problem. I don't know if we would be able to walk up to Apple and say, "This is what this," or whoever it is, "This is my strategic plan on how you should handle your pricing on this." Um, and I think and keep in mind, you got a lot of potential consultants and actual consultants in the audience. Sometimes think about, like, if I was a part of the team to help this big company solve this, what would I do? And I just put that question out there because you guys are the smart ones in the room, and I'm just a commoner.
they can reach out in the back channel. That's what I'm saying. we can we can
Yeah.
we
I'll
can
tell
flesh
you,
that shit right out.
incidentally,
You just
We
parse the
should start
value.
our
you see how they post the cost of all the components of a Pixel phone and an iPhone. And I wonder, how come they don't do that for a Louis Vuitton bag?
Yeah, Apple's not going to be the cost-based pricing leader, right? They're the successor on the other side, the value price. So, Robert, quite frankly, they just need to parse out the value. If it, as this starts to emerge as a bigger and bigger problem, as Phil mentioned, for the smaller devs, they took the edge off by reducing the fee rate and stuff like that. But again, it's discovery. I think it was Eric who just said shareware, and holy cow, dude! Thanks for that wormhole. Thanks for that '90s, '80s fucking wormhole. The patent that this guy came up with. God bless this guy. He's up with the angels now, but he called it fair share. And what he did is this was the startup I was at. What
Hold on,
he
David.
did, it was so freaking cool. He
David,
put a viral mark.
hold on, David. Your mic is double hot. Bring it down
Oh,
about 40% if you could.
David?
We lost you,
I,
David.
I,
David, where are you?
Oh my
What part
goodness! I
lost you when you were rolling there?
I was so excited. I
Yeah,
spoke so
very
loud.
excited.
My voice hit the mute on the screen or something. I don't know. I forget where I left off, but the innovation that this guy came up with. I don't know if you caught that he's passed on, so he's in the high tech heaven. God bless his soul.
In
Anyways,
the island.
yeah. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
yes.
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
but
Sorry. Sorry.
you're distorting your mic when you get excited.
Okay. Sorry. Anyways, he put a viral. His patent was a viral marketing wrapper on the software on basically the software. So, do you all remember playing games in like 2001, 2002, where you'd have a 30-minute or 60-minute, exploding trial, right, of some software? And so, what he did is you could actually call it fair share, and you could share with anybody you wanted. So the developer would get all of this basically free customer acquisition. So in any case, trust me, there are better app stores around the corner. The more pressure that's placed on Apple to force people to innovate, whether it's in some place like, whether Steam does it or whoever does it, it's going to happen because there's still a lot of money out there for somebody who comes up with a really great publishing service.
I still don't quite get why we need the App Store. We have a global 24/7 discoverable thing called the web, which is equally easy for anybody to throw up a website with some software on it, which is exactly what happens on the Mac and PC. All Apple need to do is be pressured into flicking a switch, and then we can all choose whether we go download software. Sure, you may have to go into settings like you do on the Mac and say, yes, I want to download apps from a third-party developer that's not on the App Store, whatever. Hit all the noddy buttons that say I'm willing to take the risk, sure, and then be allowed to do it, and then see who flourishes or doesn't based
Ah,
on that
Ben,
system.
you tease a really interesting thought here. How successful is the App Store on MacBooks, on laptops and desktops? There is both. There's browser-based apps where people download, which we historically have done, and then the mobile app store was so popular that they brought it over to the desktop, right? And some people download apps through the desktop laptop app store, and some people download apps directly from the developers. Yes? And the question is, if the app store is so goddamn great, why are people what percentage do we know? Can somebody dig up the data? It would be very interesting to see what
Exactly.
percentage of Spotify's downloads or memberships on desktops, not on mobiles, happen through the App Store versus the their website. And let's go down. That would be a very interesting data based
and
discussion.
and nobody probably knows that better than Apple. And you would suspect the fact they have you could be cynical and say the reason they haven't allowed this on iOS is because they know bloody well most people download Macs on an app the normal way, not through the App Store. So
Is there an argument to be made, just curious, that if it was a destructive app downloaded from the web to our cell phones, could they destroy cell phones that way if it was a poorly watched app that was designed to hurt cell phones?
well, how many Macs have
Yes.
been destroyed recently based on
Well,
people
by the
downloading them?
way,
Well, yeah, yeah,
if
there are
if they're
You have
problems.
to
if
be
they're
pretty dumb. You have to be pretty dumb to download something
if
that
also
destructive.
if their claims are legitimate that they're doing this to protect you and it's super important that we protect you because you're an idiot, we got to protect you, then why not force it on the MacBooks, on desktops? Why not say, you know what, you can no longer download
Well, they
from
do by default. You have to
Yeah,
Yeah,
you,
but
yeah,
you know
but
you have to
MacBook
click through a
already
bunch of hoops.
blocks. MacBook
yeah.
already blocks all the dangerous stuff. It doesn't
Well,
allow
it
you
doesn't.
to
It blocks stuff that's
download.
not on the
And
App Store. It doesn't
yeah,
block dangerous stuff. It blocks a lot of very valid,
I
high
well,
subscribe.
profile, decent
I
apps
sub.
that are
yeah,
not
I
dangerous.
whatever you
They
subscribe
want to
just
to.
call that. A MacBook
yeah.
does stop you from downloading stuff, which is not good. And on
No,
the
hold on,
phone,
not stop
App
you.
No,
Not
no,
Store.
but
good.
it's
It
no, no,
stops you
no,
downloading anything
no, no, no.
that is
It's
not
not.
via the App Store unless you click the buttons to say I want to. That doesn't mean whether it's good or bad. It just means they're not getting an App Store cut.
But
You
there,
need to be careful.
it's very important to distinguish also. Many of the most popular apps today no longer require downloads at all. They're completely browser based, anyways. For example, YouTube Music, which I subscribe to, I paid directly into the browser, and they get 100% of that money. Apple gets none of that money. Figma, Airtable, the out of the top 50 apps, maybe 40 of them have no download to download. It's in the browser.
Yeah, you're
So
talking
there's,
about progressive web apps here, and we nearly pivoted our business, not pivoted back.
I'm just speaking in layman's English so they can digest the
Yeah, they're
point we're
just
trying to
web
make here.
apps. Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
web.
Tyler, can I
So,
chime in?
But
Don't forget
so
but
to give
why?
clarification.
you're breaking up, buddy. But you can't do web apps.
to Excel to Microsoft 365, etc. What's interesting is that for many of these, the web version is actually better maintained. When they do these things, they have internal teams. One's going to be, working on the iPad version. We'll work on the mobile type kind of things. One will be working on the desktop and the web. What's interesting is that the ones for the web, it's a very simple allocation saying how many of our users are on this platform and how many can access it. And the one that has the largest platform is going to get the most number of devs internally for the feature rollouts. And it really shows when you start moving to the upper end of the spectrum of more powerful applications. The web stuff it just has better stuff it can do now. The
So
argument for this is kind of faded a lot from what it used to be.
Well, isn't it like if I download something from the Apple App Store and that app is carrying some kind of a virus or whatever, I don't know what to call it, I can ask the app store is kind of responsible for providing me clean apps, and I kind of trust it. I don't go around and download any app which is not on the App Store, because for something to be available on App Store means a certain kind of safety and security in my mind. And it's true because online, if it's not a MacBook Pro or whatever, if you download something on your PC laptop, you can download so many things and it damages your computer. App Store for me personally means safety, good apps which are not carrying anything harmful.
I think
Can we use you on our next Apple commercial?
exactly. No,
Can
I
we?
don't know of any software that can damage the hardware of a computer unless the user is a total idiot and leaves something on like 24/7 that's doing Prime
Yeah,
95 trying to burn out the CPU.
I am that idiot who leaves stuff 24/7 running on my laptops, and I've burned many laptops in the past
I
until
can't.
I went to the Apple,
Okay. So look,
Right.
we
so
a
yeah, there are
while ago
people like me.
we tried to add web apps to, if you go to Kickstarter, type my name, you'll see I've done 6 7 Kickstarters. One of them was progressive web apps. It's the only one we cancelled it, not because it didn't fund, it did fund, but it didn't fund spectacularly enough. And one of the reasons web apps, which is what Tyler's talking about, aren't as popular as they could be is because Apple don't release all the APIs that Google do. On Google, a web app it's absolutely a first party app. It appears in your applications. You can add it to your homepage. You can do all the stuff an app would want to do, all the hardware access. Not the case on Safari still. And I'm pretty sure this isn't by mistake that Apple's decided that they don't want to properly support web apps. So we
Hmm.
had a lot of conversations
But
with Google, but then we
then what can
decided
Also,
I
not to
add?
do it.
also time. I don't want to waste my time searching for things. I do not have that kind of expertise at all to know the difference. So I just trust Apple and go ahead from there. It saves me a lot of time and research. I'm like, okay, if it's good enough on Apple App Store, have this many stars or whatever is good for me. Otherwise, in the past, I was burning PC after PC computers every year because I was
When you
downloading
say
stuff.
burning error, you mean you actually had a hardware problem with a computer because of some software that you
It would
couldn't
stop
resolve by going
working
back to
because
backups?
of a bunch of viruses and whatever, because
Yeah,
I
but you
did
can
not
always
know where
restore to
to go, what
backups.
to do. Since
Yeah,
I
yeah.
Yeah,
The
so
moved to
safeguard.
Apple, I'm saving my time. My time is very valuable for me. So I save my time and I don't have the time to go ahead and research every single app that I'm downloading. So for convenience and time,
Neither do Apple, by the way. Neither do
No, but
Apple.
Aram just slammed a club on the kind of DIY thing, right? So just we're at a point where you just for convenience, consumers are not going to be going back to Google, right, to do stuff. It's kind of funny, Tyler. In this room, there's been so many amazing nuggets, and I feel a nugget coming when I heard you, Ben, talk about, hey, you could set this up. I just started thinking about SEO, and you could use what would be Google, right? And the first thought that came to mind is, yeah, how about that Google sphincter? And then I thought, wow, with this, can we get away from the Google sphinking that we do? So, I mean, these app stores serve a huge value. Aram's not the only one who's too busy. But the problem is, aside from all the security stuff that just needs to continue to be get done, is the discovery. All day long. It's discovery, and to do what you've done, and it's so awesome to hear that you've got a multi distribution channel kind of business where Udemy was served its purpose, but now you're going beyond that with the metrics. That's amazing. But you're doing heroic. You're doing freaking heroics, dude. And everything that you do there is not necessarily tied to the content that you're delivering, right? So that's one of the value props for developers is just go make some shit move across the screen that is engaging and can monetize. So
Sorry,
thanks.
I need to add this one thing. We've been here before. I was trying to get in the value of notifications on the App Store. Don't forget that, right? And that ties also with the OS of the phone and of course you get notifications on the Mac as well. The biggest thing I feel that you lose when you go back to the old world of downloading stuff off the internet is the how pervasive. I mean, you can't use Uber very easily without notifications. Good luck
You,
trying to use Clubhouse or WhatsApp without notification or Instagram. A lot of the value that the App Store has built is around this notification layer that's really important in providing you context of what you need to do next. Some software you don't need that. I mean, you don't need to know what the next song is playing on Spotify all the time. But if you're waiting for your food delivery or you want to get a critical message, right? I mean, notifications have, in a sense, killed SMS in some ways, like through like these messaging apps, right? So I think that's another. I'm not saying it's like insurmountable because I do, for example,
no,
get
Morgana,
Chrome
it's not
notifications.
only not
I get Chrome.
insurmountable.
Let me
It's
finish. Let me finish. I'm not going to speak for long. I know you. I get Chrome notifications on my browser from using my desktop, and I love those because I can tie those to some other apps as well. You can allow those for certain applications. But just the value of notifications for mobile context is extremely high, and we always just gloss over it. It's extremely valuable.
I don't know.
I
A friend of mine
totally
recently got a MacBook, and he was like, "I see what you mean now. I see what you mean. I should have done this years ago." And there's something that if you want to be effective, if you want to be creative, I love this one line that Jensen Huang had in his presentation. I think it was at MIT about startups. That if you want to do a pitch, you use persuasion, which is what they used to call keynote, and so that meant you had to buy a MacBook. And the 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 creative process, the workflow is much more refined in a Mac. And I think the kind of efficiency that Aram speaks to, you don't have the kind of frustrations on a Mac that you do on a PC. Although I think all of us would appreciate the ability to decide what code gets to run on our machines or not. As in the case of the MacBook, its unidentified sources has to be enabled as an option, which is kind of a little more user kind of thing. So it's intricate. It's an intricate kind of breakdance that you have to do. So
it's
it should be
hardly
like that. It should be difficult. And that friction should be the thing that is the security. It shouldn't be something that is draconian because I think the draconian layer actually allows more mischief and more bad things to happen because you're being so, I think, like the walled garden. Well, what's on the other side of the wall, right?
so.
Now we know. Now we
Morgana,
know it's not your cats that are preventing you from getting your text read or your tweets read by Cheryl.
Movana, your point about notifications, it's huge. Of course, notifications are massive value, and they can completely be done as a web app on Android, and they have been able to for ages. In fact, you tell me one thing that an Android web app can do, an Android app can do that an Android web app cannot do. By web app, I mean you go to a web page like Twitter, and or I think it's a slightly, I think it might be M dot or something. It might have a slightly different, sub URL, subdomain, and you just send it to your homepage, and it looks like an app. It's in your app list, and I don't think you'll find anything on Google, unless they've given up on progressive web apps, that a web app can't do that a first-party store downloaded app can do. The only reason you can't have that on Apple is because they don't allow it. By the way, I use Apple. I wouldn't use Apple for anything else for work. I use a gaming PC for gaming, of course. I wouldn't use anything but an iPhone, an iPad, and a Mac for work because of all the things you said above. I'm not an Apple. I'm not anti-Apple. I buy all Apple products, but I don't feel I own the phone. I own because I don't even have any control over the hardware. I rent the phone from Apple at great money. I can't run what I want to run on it without significant difficulty. And that's fine. I just surrender to that because it's an okay experience. But I don't kid myself that somebody's sitting there poring over the source code of all the apps that I download and that therefore they're safe somehow and they're fine. But they don't have the time for that, as is proven by some of the really shitty apps that are available. So just see a spade for a spade. What it is, it's a big old marketing stunt, and it's fine if you want to sell yourself to it. And I personally choose to, and I wouldn't have any other computer. But let's not say that it's something that it isn't. Web apps can do everything first-party apps can do on Google, and they could on Apple if Apple updated just a few APIs in Safari.
By the way, I heard today, and somebody might be able to give us God's truth on this, but I believe it is correct. What I heard that Chrome and other the browsers on iOS are notably not very common, aside from Chrome. And even Chrome and anyone who tries to build a web browser on iOS is technically building a variant of Safari. That
Yeah,
if
that's
you want,
correct.
that you're not able to build your own 100% code based browser in iOS. It won't be
Unless you're
approved.
Microsoft.
That
I
is
don't think
true. They
Microsoft.
know this. They know this very well. I'd love to know those stats you asked for before. On a Mac, how many people use the App Store? I think I use almost hardly ever download apps on the App Store versus from the manufacturer's
Me
website.
too. I've never used it.
Yeah, I got one or two, but why wouldn't I just go to the manufacturer's website? And then if I want to move from Mac to PC, I still own a license for the software. The lock-in you get
Exactly.
if you just go to Apple. Apple are good
Exactly.
today. How about if Apple aren't
What?
good tomorrow? How about if they're crap tomorrow? Then all the apps you've ever bought, you don't own anymore. You've just got some
Correct.
funny Apple license for them. Why not spend 2 minutes going to the manufacturer's website, the app developer's website, support them directly, give them more money, and download it from there? And then what's the disadvantage of that? Then if you want to move to PC or use that app on a PC, you've probably got a license for PC too. Whereas you may
Well,
or
and
may not when you do it
I
on
bet
Mac.
I think
Microsoft
though
has
that
the best data point on this.
if you're
You
buying
can
it off the App
you can
Store,
get
you still
Office
got a license.
you can get Office Microsoft Office from Mac two different ways, right? So why don't we ask Microsoft what their numbers say? People, because
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Microsoft on a Mac getting Microsoft Office. I would love to know the statistics on that.
Okay. Are we moving on? Are we ready? Okay.
Let's move on.
Moving on. Next up is Binance acquires Japanese-based licensed exchange called Secura Exchange for an undisclosed sum, which is Binance's re-entry into Japan and the first license in East Asia. DoorDash plans to lay off 6% of its workforce. Spotify releases their annual summary campaign called Wrapped, which has become kind of like a new end of year tradition for many folks, Spotify users. Even not, I'm not much of a Spotify user myself, but I think the whole Wrapped thing is one of the best uh, marketing campaigns, useful, practical marketing. I don't know what the word is. It's a delightful um, viral hit every year, and especially this year with the interface where I just saw it yesterday. A friend of mine has apparently early access to it, and this year it generates your own Coachella poster of all of your artists, your dream concert, like a 3-day festival, with the headliners being your most favorite artists, just like a 3-day festival Coachella poster, which is incredibly cool. And then it asks you to invite your friends to attend your dream concert. Just an even better, cooler annual execution on an already classic viral annual. How many ad campaigns, marketing campaigns go viral every year repeatedly? Like people look forward to it. That's like the creme de la creme of marketing. So kudos to the Spotify team for improving an already brilliant and I dare say genius annual marketing campaign that they do. So it just came out. And Bloomberg says, as crypto miners default on loans because they took out a whole bunch of loans to buy a bunch of hardware to mine crypto, and that made sense to do that when crypto was peaking and Bitcoin's more than 25,000 per Bitcoin USD. It makes sense economically. If you went to business school, you do the napkin math. Like I can buy this shit, pay X amount of interest on the loan, call it, I don't know, 7%, and but the thing keeps going up and to the right. Yeah, borrow as much money as you can, throw it into crypto mining rigs and mine yourself like crazy. When energy prices were lower, but now that energy prices have gone up and interest rates have gone up, it no longer makes sense to do this anymore. So there's going to be a whole bunch of collapsing crypto miners, and there's a bit of a cascading effect that goes along with that. So, for example, lenders, the collateral oftentimes is the crypto mining equipment itself. And as increases loss, this is increasing losses for the lenders as rigs values plunge because there's now it used to be there was a constriction of the supply that when mining was getting really hot, the price of the hardware would go up itself because there was more demand than supply. And now that entire pyramid has inverted. There's now a glut of supply because all the banks are sitting on all of this. What do you call that? Recaptured. What do you call that when you take collateral back from your borrower? Confiscated? It's not the right word. Anyway,
Collection.
collected.
Captured booty,
Yeah,
treasure.
yeah. All of
What
that
is it?
collateral has now been collected, and now
Foreclosure.
they've got
I think you mean foreclosure.
yeah. All of the foreclosed mining rigs, are now being sold at discount as banks tend to do, and that's driving down the price or market value for those rigs, and it has a bit of a domino effect on the lowering the price of that hardware that they're now sitting on that they already don't want to sit on. So a nice little look at the economics of Bitcoin mining. Next up is IBM and Maersk plan to shutter their blockchain supply chain service. Who cares? Emboldened by FTX's collapse, the disgraced founders of Terra, Celsius, and Three Arrows Capital have reemerged because now they don't feel so alone. They got some partners in crime. No pun intended. Offering their thoughts on SBF, FTX, and more. Yeah, well, I'm sure they did feel like the black sheeps that had, screwed the pooch on in the crypto world, and now they're in good hands. They're partying with SBF there, and they're in great company. A look at China's growing interest in the open source RISC-V chip architecture after U.S. sanctions, including enlisting Alibaba and Tencent to help design chips. Shahin, take it away. Um, yeah, I guess they need to get the IP where they can, and that's in the open source. There's open source chip architecture called RISC-V, and because they're not so hot at developing it themselves and they can't get the private shit, so they're going to go with the open source stuff. And now they're asking, well, hey, Alibaba and Tencent, you must have the people on your teams who have the skill sets to decode all of this open source goodness and turn this into chips for the motherland. Don't let
Yeah,
us down.
and this was the comment that I was trying to make the other day. How long and how much money will it take before an alternative path is found? And risk is interesting because, like x86, compared to the ARM chips kind of reduce the size of the instruction set. Still, in some exotic PC applications, Intel
Oh my
still
god.
is king.
Oh my god. Oh my god. I cannot believe the article that's coming up next. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna hold on. I can't believe this article that I'm about to read. Wow. My goodness. Before I read it, I have one more to read because it's related to the last article. Nikkei Japan is reporting that they have sources, and that's a publication I still believe when they say that, by the way, um, that detail Huawei's plans to stealthily build a domestic chip in China, a Chinese chip, a domestic chip supply chain, purely domestically, because basically they've been pushed out of the sandbox, playing with everybody else in the developed world as of late. And so they're trying to develop their own chips. Well, yeah, that's the whole point of pushing them out of the sandbox, by the way. So, yes, you're going to have to come up with your own chips now. So, anyway, sources detail Huawei's plans to stealthily build a domestic chip supply chain with partners in Beijing, Wuhan, Qingdao, and Shenzhen investing over 55.8 billion, nearly $56 billion to develop their own Chinese chip supply chain. Yeah, they're going to have to do that. It's easy. It's a piece of cake. You just figured out ballpoint pens in 2017. How hard could it be? So, the next is, and here's the one I was teasing. I can't believe this. Are you ready for this? This is a big publication, a very big publication. I'm going to save the name of the publication for later. But here's the headline. Are you ready? The headline is A Look at TikTok's Role in Spreading the Blackout Challenge, Leading Kids to Choke Themselves to Death. As critics say, the company could be doing more. We did it. We're there. Holy shit. All of my rants about why is, and by the way, here's the quiz. Which publication did the headline?
New York Times.
Guardian.
Bloomberg is in the audience listening.
The
Who is?
Inquirer,
Bloomberg wrote one too.
New York Times.
BBC?
Okay, well, whoever said
Reuters.
Bloomberg, it was Bloomberg.
Reuters.
Well, you know goddamn well it's not the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post. And we already know that the UK publications, The Guardian and what's the other notable one? In
BBC.
BBC. BBC and Guardian have been covering this extensively. Every time there was a TikTok challenge and teachers were getting assaulted and schools were shutting down all over America, they were covering it in the UK. And notably, the US was not, bizarrely. And now, it's not the Wall Street Journal, it's not the classic three amigos of the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and New York Times, but it is Bloomberg. So I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to give a big old clap on the back to our friends over there at Bloomberg, who you're only a year late on this, but better late than never, because the blackout challenge goes back a ways. There's been many, many, many more challenges since the blackout challenge, like a dozen. So Bloomberg's did it. They did it. They did the blackout challenge, and I just noticed Cheryl's not here to update the pins at the top of the room, so my apologies. I'm now pinning this hot link up at the top of the room of this Bloomberg article. There it is. Blackout challenge on TikTok is luring young kids to death. Bloomberg. I'm going to fucking clap for you twice, Bloomberg. You did it. Now what the now I'm really getting suspicious. Now I'm really confused. Why were you silent on this for the entire year this was happening? Why now? Why do this now? Why now? You're a year late. It's actually a little bizarre. It's like coming to the Christmas dinner party after New Year's. It's like January 13th, and you're like, Merry Christmas! I brought the gifts. Here's the fruit salad for the potluck. You're more than a little late on this. Like this ship has sailed.
Well,
So
Tyler, you
why
do realize that
why
Bloomberg was
It's
set
been
up
up there.
to mostly do business and economic news, not general
yes
news. So give them,
yes
yeah.
and your comment adds credence to the conspiracy theory that I'm about to reveal. Can you guess why I think they're sharing this now?
Because they can't delay any longer unless they'll
No,
get criticized for not
no,
actually reporting the news.
no. I
because it's
actually
time to shut them
hinted.
down.
They're trying
I
to
well,
support Twitter and Elon.
there you go. You got it. So, and I said this 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Elon was going to revive Vine, and I said, "Oh, I'd be interested to see if we start to see an anti-TikTok movement because Elon knows how to pull the levers in Washington and in the media." And so here we are. But the blackout challenge, if you're going to pick one of the challenges to go after TikTok on, that's the one to go after. That ship has long set sailed, but that was the one to really hang them on. And so here it is in a headline on Bloomberg. So who is the author of this? What's her name? Where'd she go? Olivia Carvel. And Olivia, why did you choose to do this article? Hi, Olivia. Hi, this is Tyler and the gang over here at Technews. We'd love to know, Olivia. Great to see your interest in the blackout challenge. Great to see you use a headline confirming that children actually died as a result of it. And this very importantly, predates by many months the Wall Street, was it the Washington Post? It was the Washington Post who did the whistleblowing papers on Facebook and how Instagram is so bad for the kids. You know, all those kids that so many bad things are happening to on those platforms, right? And yet the kids were dying on TikTok, and yet there was zero coverage of that. So great to see the turn of events here. Great to see TikTok getting a headline that needs to be discussed. Whether I'm happy to reserve judgment. An investigation needs to be done. This is worthy of investigation. So I'm just glad to see Bloomberg shining a light on this a year late, and but with I found this on the web. No one's talking to you, Siri. And the the timing is suspicious when it's this late, especially when Twitter. Oh boy, would Twitter benefit! Oh dear sweet God, Jesus, would Twitter benefit if TikTok were to go down? And let me remind you, we started out today with a headline that I think is worth re-mentioning. It was the headline that Republican lawmakers are now going to beating the battle drums on the Apple monopoly as a result of Elon Musk's tweets. So, do let's see how this dance unfolds. If the Republicans are so fast to they're now got their guns drawn on Apple simply because Elon did a tweet about calling out Apple's kind of duopoly, and now they're ready to start legislating on that. How quick could Elon shut down TikTok in the U.S., opening one of the most lucrative opportunities on planet Earth for Twitter, uniquely Twitter? There's a
Tyler, I
couple
said
of
this before.
yes.
I'll tell you right now.
Go ahead.
Politically, TikTok is too popular with the general population for people
Good point.
to shut it down.
I take your point. That's a great point.
So I have a question on this, but a great topic, Tyler. Um, there's probably a couple things you never know. Also, if this particular author these challenges eventually reach the authors too, with kids in their neighborhood and their school district. But a separate thing is, why was this challenge or these TikTok challenges so big in the US, but not a viral issue in India, Eastern Europe, South America? Why weren't they as big a issue? These assaults on the teacher or choke things. What is it? Is there just something wrong with us, or is there just some program that's targeting us? Are we just soft?
Gullible, yeah. I don't know. TikTok's viral challenges keep luring young kids to their deaths. Holy shit! What a headline!
Can I, Robert? The soft thing that triggered me, bro. I'm sorry.
I like to trigger you, David,
I
but can I
know,
add some more salsa to that?
cause I love salsa. Put it on, bro. I
No,
love
but
it.
the answer to Robert's question might be that the versions in other countries might be different because there's a version of TikTok in China. They call it something else, but it's very different than the one
Douyin.
they allow in America.
Hang on,
So,
hang
But,
on.
but I think Robert's question is legit because Douyin, that's only China, but the rest of the world share the same database. So the challenge that you see in the US also see in other countries except China. So that's why, yeah. So why it is more like a severe in the US than other countries.
Yeah, and thank you, BB, because set aside China, there are still over 180 countries out there. They have touched. I don't know if all of them have touched the challenge, but other countries have touched the challenge or saw it. Why aren't they doing it?
Okay. That was enough salsa for me, buddy. And you know
Can
I
I
love
add
you,
some
buddy.
Tapatía?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so there are few things. Internet is not readily available in all countries. Not all the youth have the phones. They don't have that much time. A lot of the children around the world have to work, go to school, or even do child labor, and that's not the case in the United States. And
But
there are
but
so many
assume
other
but assume the ones that have the access, not the ones that don't have the access.
yes. So
Assume the ones that have the access.
there are cultural differences. There are differences in the way people relate to things. Western culture is different, and algorithm is at the top of the list. Algorithm on Chinese apps are very different than it is for us, because I think Tyler covered that clip from some religious leader mentioning that Chinese kids are exposed to the videos on TikToks, inspiring them to create something new or go to space or something, as opposed to what our kids are shown here. So TikTok algorithm kind of is controlling the content shown.
Yeah, yeah,
no, but
yeah.
I think Robert's question is why not Canada, unless we're not reporting on the Canadians because it's a
Exactly.
country,
Thank you.
because that's a similar country, you know.
Countries
I
similar, ends are different.
Yeah, I just it's I don't see how we can say, since we don't have on our headlines and in our media sphere a good representation of all of the things that are happening around the world, right? Let's just say that we've got the biggest horn, and then there's also just what media do we listen to, right? That's one of the issues. But the trigger for me, and is making this salsa lovely delicious meal just kind of is is the, and Robert, I love you, bro, but soft is the thing that kind of got me, and I'm very I think I've gone through a lot in my own life stages, because people, y'all change as you get older. Okay, what you how you are as a 20-year-old teenager, 30s, 40s, and dare I say 50s and beyond. The way that your perspective changes often, right? So I've just become even more protective. I was pretty protective as I was younger, but I'm just way more protective now of future generations and little kids. And I know, and let me frame it this way, because coming from the video game space, 30 years ago, when Tipper Gore went with video game violence and all that to DC, it was for good reason, because we were trying to think, we were trying to get our head around it. Is something going to happen? Is there an effect on the children? And the game thing has not played out quite as we thought, in terms of, like, You'll play Call of Duty. You're going to be in the streets, but the social media and your friends and a group of them bullying you, and there is a percentage of our population that crumble, they implode, right? So I just want to just draw attention to that. Are we soft? Are we? Is it parenting, or are the kids soft? If kids are if suicide's involved, we really got to dive into that, and we got to be protective of children. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. Thanks for letting me share some thoughts. I know I bounced around a bit, but that's what a trigger response will do.
It
And
comes down to
another
access.
thing is
I
like
believe that. I'm sorry, real quickly. I believe that the access that children have in America is underestimated. Just across the border, the same kids don't have access to the cell phones that they do here in the States. And I'll be very specific. Parents use the excuse, my child needs access to me in an emergency. So kids have all these cell phones in their school systems, and I don't believe they have the same access in other countries. The access to the cell phones in the systems of these schools and their iPads is, I believe, multiple times more than any other country in the world. And I know that's true in versus Mexico.
So Robert, I just actually just ran a quick Google search. That was an interesting question, and I was already able to find one question article from the Canadian Broadcast Company Corporation, excuse me, that they had a similar issue with a challenge about like vandalizing schools, in Canada. That this, and they mentioned, of course, it was also in the U.S. So apparently, it happens. I guess some of it happens in other countries. We're not going to hear about Canada unless it's a uniquely Canadian story because it's a small country. This Canada, though, on the flip side, when you're Canadian Corporation, they're going to report the Canadian story, but also mention that it's a U.S. phenomenon, which is what they did. But we're not, unless it's a story that's uniquely Canadian, probably doesn't get reported in the U.S.
Hey
Yeah,
Ken, thanks a lot on that because
yeah,
the question I was really asking is wasn't the depth of the exposure, it is those who have access. Why aren't they doing the same thing? And basically what you're saying is with the example of Canada is those who do have access, there are possibly similar things happening in those countries. It might just be underreported.
That's right. You hear underreported here, right?
underreported in the news, but not in the ER data. If you check out the ER data and the trend related morbidity, mortality, the numbers are overwhelmingly in, the evidence to how directly these trends over TikTok have caused, lethal, non-lethal damage to property and children. And at the same time, the trend of the influencers, quote unquote, as aspiring future career is far more prevalent here in Western nations than others because of, not only social norms, but other factors. The keeping up with Kardashian, the live transmitting of your, daily routine as a content, that idea here is more acceptable than other countries.
So we're not soft, we're just sponges. David, does that work a little bit better?
I've been waiting to open my mic, and I back channeled you, bro. I'd love to meet you someday, for sure, and everybody in the room, right? So, um, I'll finish with this. We've got our first school closure due to snow, and I'm gonna go play in the snow with my little kid. That's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, but I'll just end it there. I'm gonna act on what I perceive as part of this issue, which is parenting and trying to cultivate,
Absolutely.
and be protective and teach them how to be adults and be really great future adults. That's what you're doing as a parent. So, thanks. Deliciously spicy. Thanks, Robert.
Okay, moving along. So the next one is Steve Media found out we covered that. We covered that. Oh boy, where'd it go? Oh, that was the Bloomberg one, right? Yes. Finance. DoorDash lays off. Crypto miner. Spotify Wrapped. Kraken, which is another U.S. based crypto exchange, plans to lay off 30% of its workforce, citing a need to adapt to current market conditions. SpaceX's Starlink increases the price for new Ukrainian customers to $700, far above the basically $400 cost from earlier in the year. Monthly subscriptions rise to $75. So that's the end. That's the upfront fee. Yes, Ben might be best able to answer that as a Starlink subscriber.
No, I'm not. No, I've seen one. I've got a friend who's got one. I'm not a subscriber, so I'm not up to date on the prices. Sorry.
So it's monthly subscriptions are now $75. That doesn't seem bad at all, honestly, for the speed that they're doing. And new customer rates have gone up from 400 to 700. There's an upfront fee for the hardware, basically, for the satellite dish, for example. Okay, a look at China's growing interest in the open source one. We covered that. We covered that. TikTok, we got that. Maris, we got that. A look at Black American crypto investors, many of whom bought in the near top as the market declines from its 2021 peak, and some lose significant sums. That's interesting. I remember, I imagine others do too. Jack Dorsey partnered with SC, aka Mr. Carter, aka Jay Z. Most of you will know him as Jay Z. Jay Z and Jack Dorsey got together to do something called the Marcy Project, or as part of the Marcy Project, to promote Bitcoin and crypto investing to the projects where Sean Carter, aka Jay Z, grew up at a time when crypto was quite hot. And it pains me to think that those folks got the short end of that stick.
Hey,
That's really
there
fucked
was
up.
an article or two. I'll look it up about like for example and I can only speak to black population. They didn't do one on Hispanic and Asian, but definitely over-indexed. We're what 12% U.S. population. I think it was in some cases approaching well over 16 to 18% of those who opted to dive into this thing and impact it. But you know what? It's the choice of those who dove in, and it's that stupid FOMO thing, and never buy into something you don't understand. And you just got to deal with the implications.
Next up
But
And
is
Tyler, can I
Marcy
share?
project, they gave out the Bitcoin for free. They didn't encourage people to, so use
okay.
their own money. I mean, I'm gonna tell you, just probably Clubhouse was maybe a worse culprit getting people into crypto, and there were a lot of, and believe me, there were a lot of rooms here. I mean, people of all colors, but a lot of black people in those rooms in Clubhouse. I mean, Clubhouse was a big promoter of all sorts of crypto, you know, and this is where, and I think Dorsey only dealt with Bitcoin specifically. I mean, I don't think that the Marcy project dealt with the wider stuff with crypto. It wasn't like they were telling people to go into Ripple and everything else.
Ken, you're spot on. I saw it. Also, what many of you probably didn't see, there were actually campaigns where people were going through the communities and pumping people up. And you actually had actors and actresses supporting some of these things, doing grassroots fundraising on this damn thing that these people just didn't understand. So, and I'll tell you, Ken, you're spot on Clubhouse because a handful of us who are more cautious, conservative, and we consider ourselves practical. If we raised a couple of questions in those rooms, we were labeled assholes, people who already made their money and don't care about the masses, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, of course, the other thing they call you is a sellout when you try to tell people to be cautious and have a good work ethic.
Yep.
I remember there was one room. I mean, I didn't go into too many of those rooms, but in the early days, when somebody, and just happened to be, by the way, because you just brought it up, happened to be the woman was black, but she was, touting like getting like 9%. This is when rates were zero, like 9% interest, to like lend your crypto and all of that. Basically, you're and it's like getting monopoly money and back. It wasn't like that. She's getting back cash, you know, and even if she was, it was probably a Ponzi. I mean, and I try to say, how could you get 9% and think it's riskless? Okay, but she did. I mean, and I'm not saying she was a fraud. I think she believed it. Okay, because there were a lot of people who were like looking for yield, and there's a lot of these like quote unquote yield projects that were out there. That would a lot of them were paying you in other crypto. It was almost like a payment in kind bond, and so you have to assume the other crypto because of the issue with stable coins, right? I think that was the issue, that she's getting paid in stable coin, and stable coin is also nonsense, because nothing, you can't keep a peg on anything. I mean, even the Mexican peso broke its peg with the dollar. A lot of people, Bill Ackman, one of the leading hedge fund managers, just wrote an article the other day. He thinks the Hong Kong dollar, which is pegged to the U.S. dollar, that peg is not sustainable. So, I mean, when you have all this other stuff with, stable coin, then you find out that Tether doesn't even have all the dollars it's supposed to have to back up, their stable coin. I mean, so a lot of people fell into this,
Well, they
and
also fell into the movement of this. How do I quickly solve this wealth gap thing versus saying, how about I just work harder and save a little bit more? They wanted to leapfrog into this thing, and there's this movement that's out there to solve this wealth gap fast, that's causing people to do really stupid things. And this crypto and bit stuff have, I mean, some people literally leverage themselves out. I mean, you guys haven't seen half of it.
It's going to happen again. I've seen this pattern before. What you guys are discussing is actually very accurate. The looking at it, I spent months listening and trying to absorb as much as I could. The patterns that I've seen that are important, that I believe will repeat themselves, are inevitable. The people at the top, when it came to Clubhouse, I'll call it the 2020 revolution. I saw this in 2016 and 17. The people at the top had great speakers, but maybe not successful in the realm. But because they had friends who were successful, the successful millionaires, they really came from a background of computer science or engineering, and they had successes. They got involved in the 2012, 2013s, maybe even 14, or even 2010. Those guys were killing it, but they were so far successful, they got to pivot and reinvest into other ventures. But those would be like the guys at the top of the room, maybe three, four, five, and six. One, two, and three would be led by clubhouse leaders who just had an amazing audience because they could speak to anybody and sell water to anybody. So those guys believed they were experts. And sadly, and I'd have to keep my mouth shut because I would get shammed and kicked out of the room. But I'm watching these guys mislead the audience and saying, I believe this coin is going to go up, and it was borderline illegal how they were promoting these coins, but you couldn't say anything to them because they would blacklist you. And they had followings of these women who would curse at you. No, I know this guy, I trust him. I don't see these rooms anymore. And
Oh, you are spot on. Thank you for sharing that, because I had pitchforks coming at me. So glad to see somebody else experienced.
Oh, I did too. I went up and asked a question because I did not understand what it was all about, and I got yelled at for raising concerns. Thank goodness those rooms are not there anymore. But a lot of price was paid by innocent people who, of course, were late to the game, did not know what was going on, and were taken advantage of. That was, not right in any way or form. Um,
Aram, you bring up a good point too. And it's always a cautious thing on investing or any money thing. Anybody who gets fucking pissed at you for asking a question, that's a warning in itself. So thanks for bringing it out, because a number of us asked questions before, and these people just went total haywire. So
Yeah, I've been. have a pushback with one of the things that I've always asked was, what did you see happen after the Bitcoin futures trading came in? And that's one question that anyone who pushes back generally can't ask, or they want to ignore that aspect of it. And I've also flirted with the idea of having rooms to help people learn uh, financial literacy until someone from this club actually did just that. And her rooms are absolutely amazing. And she touches upon all of these issues. And I guess I noticed that, that she doesn't actually do any promotion. She's very knowledgeable and she doesn't inject her own personal opinion. And
You
I
mean
think everyone,
Alexander,
yeah,
right, Kyle?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I was
She's the
just about to
best.
You
say her
might
name.
lose your name. Everyone.
I was doing the lead up to the name, but absolutely, she's been the most grounded in reality outside of anyone that I've encountered on this app when it comes to cryptocurrency and financial markets.
Well, she worked for the SEC and she also knows her stuff from being a lawyer for crypto. So she's in a perfect spot to talk about them.
Yeah, can I just wanted to say I spent 10 years as a financial planner interfacing with the average Joe person for a few years while I was at a bank with JP Morgan Chase. I covered the Austin area for 10 years of explosive growth. The average person doesn't know that the real answer is there's only four things you can do. Let's say if you're not saving for a goal, you're sending someone to retirement or college. You can either save more now, reduce the goal, delay the goal, or earn more on your money in between. And that last one is all about risk tolerance, risk taking, the reason to work with an advisor so you don't take too much risk, security, trust, all these things that come up as topics. But financial literacy is not taught in our schools. That last, somebody thinks there's a fifth thing. It's a magic wand. It was crypto, or it was the housing market, or it's rich dad poor dad. They're looking for a pill, a a prescription from a doctor. It's probably why Aram's not practicing medicine. It's because people go to the doctor for a miracle. By the time that they've made too many bad investments in their own health, they don't want to hear the truth that they need to save more, or that they're inadequately funding, or they need to change their expectations. So I stopped advocating for that when I left the career. I still always advocate for people to be sane and rational. Robert, to your point, or to everyone, Kyle, asking questions. The Socratic method is the method to learn. If someone's not tolerant to meet you where your question is, just try to clarify your question. If they're going to be an asshole, they're probably hiding something or trying to manipulate you. That's advice for life, and there you go.
Love you, David Austin. That's what I call you, David Austin. We'll have brews one of these days.
Sure.
Okay, moving on. Brazil's Chamber of Deputies has approved a long-standing crypto bill defining digital assets, and their service providers bill now requires presidential approval. Yeah, there you go. South America could go hog wild on the whole Bitcoin thing. Some prominent anti-fascist organizers and journalists have had Twitter accounts suspended in the past week after right-wing operatives appealed to Elon Musk, according to The Intercept. Elon Musk claims to be fighting for free speech in America, but the social network's new owner appears to be overseeing a purge of left-wing activists from the platform. Okay. Next up, Airbnb launches a program to help renters find an apartment in 25 US markets and then list a spare room or occasionally the whole apartment on the platform. Sounds like subletting. Bloomberg says they have sources. Ledger X, known as FTX US Derivatives, plans to make $175 million available for FTX's bankruptcy. Amazon Kindle Scribe review, who cares? OpenSea, the NFT exchange, says NFT creators collectively earned $1.1 billion in royalties in 2022 so far.
Tyler, can you go back to the FTX thing with 175 million? So so the way that you just read that thing, it sounds like what we call dip financing. So you're saying somebody's giving them money post bankruptcy to operate.
Say that again.
You're saying someone's giving FTX 175 million dollars post bankruptcy to help them continue operations, right? Is that pretty much what you're saying?
I'm going to pin it to the top of the room
That
for you.
that's usually called dip financing. I didn't think that anybody would give them dip financing. Usually, you get dip financing when you're an operating company that simply has too much debt. You're a car company that goes bankrupt, you're GM or something, and you get what's called debtor in possession financing that comes in, after the bankruptcy. By law, you're going to get paid back before all the pre-petition creditors. That's why, like, say, maybe JP Morgan would lend money in that situation, but it assumes that you've got a functionally operating company and you just have too much debt. It's not clear if FTX even has a profitable operation, at its core. So that would surprise me. But
The Bloomberg article that I just pinned to the top says FTX's Ledger X, a solvent corner of SBF's fallen empire, will put millions in bankruptcy pot. Money could be used to repay creditors to crumbled crypto firm. Funds come from 250 million set aside for CFTC application.
oh, you know what that could be, because there's an administrator now for the FTX bankruptcy, and there's like 100, whatever it was, 100 plus subsidiaries that they file with. If he found a couple of small solvent ones, he might just be moving the money around in order to. I mean, so that kind of makes sense. But it's not an outside lender. Okay.
Okay, so next up is, where did we leave off? That way. Amazon Kindle Scribe, we don't care. Binance acquires the license, we covered that. And OpenSea, we covered that. That's pretty much the. Well, Coinbase says Coinbase Wallet will no longer support Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum Classic, and Stellar due to low usage. South Dakota governor signs a executive order banning TikTok for state agencies, employees, and contractors using state devices over China's security threat. That's a Bloomberg article again. What is going on? Why is Bloomberg writing two articles in this? This adds to my conspiracy theory. Does tell me if I'm cuckoo.
Well, if
But
it's if it's the same author, she's probably now following TikTok, and so if the governor of South Dakota did that, she just probably picked up on it and just wrote one more article. Is it the same author?
it's not.
Interesting.
Oh, well, then Bloomberg has it in for TikTok. Um,
Now,
but Tyler, you were asking if you're crazy? Yes.
am I crazy? Yeah, I know I'm crazy. But on this particular issue, my conspiracy theory that I presented about 30 minutes ago, and Dr. Francine, were you here for you were here for the previous Bloomberg article? And I got to read it again because this is the humdinger of headlines for 2022. They're coming in right at the buzzer at the end of 2022 with this one. But my God, what a headline! I just got to read it just because it's got. Listen to the sound of this headline. TikTok's viral challenges keep luring young kids to their deaths.
Whoa. New York Post?
Bloomberg.
I know, I was kidding.
Children are dying from the blackout challenge. Why isn't the world's most popular app doing more to protect them? Olivia Carville. Now, my God, that's a headline. Because it implies that this is an ongoing thing when it says the challenges keep luring young kids to their deaths. It's not a singular incident. It's a far bigger uh, assertion. So, on
Are
top
there
of
a
that, and I
lot of
said
stats? Does she have a lot of stats for that?
I haven't. It's paywalled, so I can only see the first paragraph, and it starts with the story of the poster child format of picking one isolated incidents and getting pulling the emotional heartstrings, on this. Anyway, you know the story. So now, when I read that article, I said, "Now wait a minute. This is peculiar. That this article, if this article had come out when the blackout challenge was happening and the kids were dying, okay, no problem. Yeah, that makes sense. It's news. A kid died. Write the story. Why are you writing the story a year later, after that ship has sailed, long gone, long, long, long gone? Why write it now?" And I said, that's almost kind of strange that you're walking in the door on January 15th with Christmas presents saying, "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas." That's a little weird. That's a little bit strange. It's not strange at all if you come in on December 24th, 25th, even on 26th. You come in on 26th. Okay, we'll give you that. That's not crazy. That's not so strange. Anytime after January 1st, it starts getting a little weird. When you're doing it late January, now it's weird. Now it's very suspect. So I'm wondering, is it possible? Because who stands to benefit most if TikTok is banned? Let's be honest. Twitter
Yeah,
stands to benefit so incredibly. What's the Trumpism? Bigly. This is so bigly that if TikTok gets banned now, what Trump paid for Twitter, I'm sorry, Trump. Jesus Christ, my brain's freaking out. What Elon paid for Twitter
No, they're the same guy.
will seem will seem like a bargain if TikTok gets banned and Twitter's ready to replace it. By the way, the last comment I heard was they were aiming to replace it by the end of the year. They were going to bring back Vine by the end of the year. So if Vine comes back, TikTok gets banned. Oh my lord, is that a honeypot of an economic windfall opportunistically for Twitter? So now, if by the way, all that's required is some stories like this, precisely like this, exactly precisely this story. If you were gonna hang TikTok, you would hang them on the blackout challenge because there was a dozen other
But
challenges.
Tyler,
But if you were gonna,
let's be realistic, okay? Look,
yes,
forget about what I said even about TikTok's popularity. You're ByteDance. You have a parent company, okay? I mean, they're going to operate like any other company. Okay, okay. If they think they're going to get banned because of their parent company ownership, what they'll do is figure out how to divest it, so they're not the
yeah,
owners anymore. Take the money
okay,
and use it for something else. But TikTok will then become an American company, truly an American company, run by Americans. I mean, they
Yeah,
could.
Trump tried to do that. Remember? He
Well,
tried to sell
yeah,
it
he
to
doesn't have
Larry
he doesn't have
Ellison.
anything to pay, but they'll sell it to a Kardashian led company. Then it'll be American.
I got something else for you, Tyler. So
okay.
this Olivia, she's on Clubhouse, and I've never seen her in this room, but when you brought up this issue a year ago, she started making articles, and I go back as far back as I've been able to find, and maybe further, but 7 months ago, she wrote an article for Bloomberg. TikTok sued 10-year-old that dies in viral blackout challenge. And she has follow ups 7 months ago. 7 months ago, she wrote another one 6 months ago on the blackout challenge. And she wrote another one that's just recently. So
So she's
she's
on the
been after
blackout
TikTok.
challenge beat.
So Luis, you win MVP today and for the week and maybe for the month. That thank you for finding that. I'm surprised we didn't see those other headlines. First of all, and that's bizarre that she might have been in here. And I
It's totally
wow.
possible. It's totally possible.
Well, I love that. First of all, you solved my conspiracy. The conspiracy theory has now been thoroughly debunked. So thank you for debunking the conspiracy theory because this is just something she's doing, and kudos to her for doing it. And she deserves. She's doing. So anyway, so it's not my. We can toss out my conspiracy theory. Thank you.
But
So
Tyler, that is a good direction if the Twitter do provide Vine, because right now, if TikTok is bound, I think the one benefit most is Instagram or is Snapchat, that kind of app. because Twitter is very bad at video, all this chance thing. So yeah, I think, and another point is that if TikTok facing all these charges, I think it's very easy for them to change their algorithm because they can do it in China. That is, just add a snap, like can change the algorithm and to remove all those sort of death challenges. So that will be some steps to totally remove TikTok in the US. And I believe they have some method to survive.
To change. Okay, sorry, I'm multitasking here today. And what else? Pinterest plans to end its creator rewards program, which offered cash bonuses when creators completed certain goals. Global smartwatch shipments increased 30%, led by India. Amazon's AWS expects to add employees next year in 2023 and will continue building data centers despite the company's hiring freeze and cuts in other divisions. And there you go. Those are your big boring headlines for today. We did it. Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody. Sorry.
they're making their cuts in Alexa. They found
Yes, that's right.
Alexa is useless.
Yep, we read that. A billion a year they're spending there. So thank you, everybody. We'll do it again tomorrow. Sorry for not having. If we can do the tweets, if anyone's got tweets, feel free to share them. I don't have any tweets myself, but I want to make sure if anyone found a good story that they want to share, a tech story, and whether or not they tweeted it, let's go ahead and open mic for anyone who found a tech story that we didn't cover in the big boring headlines, but that they want to cover. Feel free.
Yeah.
So Tyler, I tweeted something which is quite frankly very techy, but also very boring compared to all the other stuff you've been talking about. There was something I tweeted out about some NVIDIA chips. I don't even remember anymore, but but it's in your pile. I can go look for it, but it's very boring compared to all the stuff you're talking about.
Okay. Well, thank you. Uh, Sorry again for multitasking, and we'll do it again tomorrow. What's today? Thursday. Yeah, tomorrow's. Oh, Wednesday.
Tomorrow's December
We'll do it again.
1st.
Okay. Into the end of the year we go.